For those of you that don't know, my name is Geoff and I have ADD. Could you tell? Can anyone tell? You could probably tell, right?
Good morning, Geoff.
Good morning. Thank you. I have ADD, and if this is your first time ever hearing this, you should have really known this because, as you can probably tell, I stutter when I have too much going in my head. I always have a song in my head too. I remember this from maybe as far back as first grade. Just having a song every day in my head. So sometimes, like people I work with, they'll come up to me, or like a kid, if a kid is like, they think this is really funny, they'll come up to me and they'll ask, Mr. Barrett, what song's in your head today? So it's really funny. Today's song in my head is actually, for some reason, it's Sunshine, You Are My Sunshine. And I don't know why. It's really kind of embarrassing that I just told you that. Anyway, but ADD is fun. You end up thinking about multiple things at the same time, but not multiple things as in you can process two streams of data at the same time in your brain. You're jumping between two things at the same time. If someone tells you something early on in the day, you will definitely forget everything until about 11 a.m. And then the rest of the stuff that you heard before that comes flooding back in little waves, and you go, oh, there was a meeting right now, or like 5 minutes ago. Oh no. Yeah, or that thing there was a call or something like that, and you definitely agreed to do something that you totally forgot that you really shouldn't have agreed to do. And then someone comes into your classroom and goes, hey, I'm here to relieve you because you gotta go do that thing. And you have to go, oops, and you have to basically go, oh yeah, sure, and it's something that's definitely an inconvenience or something. It's a lot of fun. One thing that I've learned that manages it, at least for me though, is being a slight running-aholic, meaning I do ultra marathons. Now, I graduated from marathons, and the first year that I went to Carrie Ann, and I said, Carrie Ann, I think I'm going to do an ultra marathon. And she thought it was like a mud race or something. Like, one of those mudder races where I don't know how to describe it, you jump through mud. And she said, that sounds easier than a marathon. And I went, really? And then I told her, she asked, what's the course? And I went, 30 miles. And she went, I'm sorry, I thought you said 30 miles. Can you say that again? And I went, it's 30 miles. And she had this kind of pessimistic look on her face, like, I'm sure you could do this. But the question is, should you? Like, should a human do this? And I went on to explain, no, this is the smallest, this is the shortest ultramarathon. Like, there are 200-mile races, there are multi-day events, that kind of thing. I'm choosing the least crazy thing. And then she started to come around to the idea, go, okay, well, Geoff could have been going way more overboard than this, so I guess I'll give him this one. And since then, things have been really interesting. 2 years ago was the first time I ever laced up for my first ultramarathon. Failed incredibly hard. It was amazing. Took me it should have taken me maybe less than 6 hours to finish my first race. This was in Corvallis. And it took me, 7.5 hours to finish the race. At one point, I didn't realize that your muscles could rebel against you if they didn't like a decision you made. But there's two large, very angry muscles called your quads in the front of your leg. And if both of those were to, completely use all of their power to stop you, your face would go straight into a gopher hole, which happened, actually. I was going downhill, and all of a sudden, there was this guy, actually, right next to me. He's like, how you doing, man? I'm like, I'm good. All of a sudden, my right leg decided I was not good. And to demonstrate that to this other human that could possibly save this crazy man from doing damage to his body, so my leg just locks in place, and I went, hold on, and I fell. I think I did say, hold on. I just went, hold on a second, and I basically had the option. I didn't have the option of not falling. I had the option of there or there, and I decided that the softer mud was probably my best bet. So that was my first ultramarathon. My second one, though, was really fun. It was in Central Oregon. It was at the Pacific Crest Weekend Sports Festival, and you start way above on Cascade Lakes Highway, and at this snow park, Winoga Snow Park. There's a whole bunch of bike trails, and that's kind of what you run on. So the first half of the race was great. It was kind of all uphill, so that was kind of a drag. The second half began to go downhill, and then you hit this patch. And I don't know how to describe it other than it's summer in Central Oregon, and in the morning it was like 40, so you felt like, this is great, I could run forever, life is amazing. And then it's 90 degrees, and you're, in the shade, and it's 90 degrees. There's no air movement, you're going through this dusty corner where you can see all of the dust that you're currently breathing. And you're wondering to yourself, why do I run? Running is terrible. I hate running. Why do I have feet? My feet hurt. I hate feet. And you start to, have all of this negative self-talk and things like that. You think about the weirdest things. I decided I didn't like sandwiches. I hate sandwiches. Who cares? Sandwiches. Be something. Don't be something in between two other somethings. Be your own. And it just didn't make sense. And I was in the middle of this weird delirium when I come around the corner, and I'm like, at this point I'm praying like nonsense prayers, and I'm pretty sure God is like writing down, going, I love this guy. And I come across, all of a sudden I turn the corner, and I hear loud rock music. In the middle of the woods, I hear loud rock music. Then I know, I've completely lost it. Off the rails, mile 21, lost it. Completely lost it. And I didn't lose it though. Someone had brought a boombox out in the middle of the forest. They set up a table and they had a whole bunch of PB&Js on it and a whole bunch of like apples and everything like that in the middle of nowhere. And not only that, but I came face to face with, he was about 7'2", I would imagine. Big, huge, burly dude wearing cut-off shorts, jeans, so jorts. Cut-off jean shorts, a flannel with the arms cut out of it, gigantic muscles, gigantic big black beard, and he had a southern drawl. And he comes out of the forest and he says, "Boy, look at that boy! He doesn't look good at all." I didn't know what to do. I came out of there and he goes, "Oh, you need to get yourself some sandwiches." In a big old southern drawl, and I remember thinking to myself, either this is the craziest dream I have ever had, or the best thing that's ever happened to me. And he actually, he grabbed me by so I had a backpack on, a little backpack with like hydration on it. He grabbed me by the backpack, like he was leading a dog, and he pulls me over here and he goes, you need to get yourself some sandwiches. You like peanut butter? And I neglected to tell him, no, I actually hate sandwiches now, but I went, you're not going to refuse someone giving you food. He ended up basically picking up my backpack with one hand, refilling my water reservoir, even though I didn't ask for that, with another gigantic, 2-gallon pitcher somehow that he had. And then he begins basically to feed me because I'm kind of going, I can get it with. And he kind of went, hey, try this one. This one's I made this special myself. And he, put it in my mouth, and it was great. But greatest experience. Anyway, stuffs me full of sandwiches, puts water in there. Basically, I think he slapped me at some point upside the head. You can do it. Get it together, boy. And shoves me onto the trail. And I look back and I go to wave, and he said, "Don't wave, get out of here!" And I just kept going. Oh man, I didn't believe in miracles during races because I felt, this is something I got myself into, and God is basically saying, I'm leaving this man to his own devices. I didn't believe in middle of race miracles until I saw that man right there, and that changed everything for me. I don't know about you. I hope I made your day there. But what I'm going to talk to you today about is something that happens during waiting. If you've ever been in, waiting times where it's the drudgery, it's a transition between here and the end of the race, and you just want to give up and quit. But there's three main things that God wants to teach us today in Genesis. So that's why I kind of wanted to bring that up, because when I was reading this, and I was reading about Noah being stuck inside a giant shoebox for a whole bunch of days, I kind of thought to myself, when you're in between times, you can have a lot of negative self-talk, but as soon as you see God come through, you think to yourself how silly I am, and it prompts you to do crazy things. I was flat out singing to God the rest of the race, because I was so thankful for this giant 7-foot-tall southerner. He may not have even had a southern drawl. That's how my brain chemistry was going. But that's what I perceived, and that's what I was so thankful for the rest of the race. And I wanted to share that with you today because I think that's what Noah was going for, to a very extreme extent. And it starts out in verse 1, Genesis 8, verse 1, with the funniest statement in this entire chapter. But God remembered Noah. No kidding. He's the only man in his family on earth at the time in a giant floating, the thing looks like a shoebox. There's a guy down in Tennessee that actually recreated the entire ark. You can look it up later after church, not now because I'm speaking, darn it. But it's if you want to Google image search that thing, the guy down in Tennessee, and it's now a theme park. He recreated it to spec using the Genesis 7 specifications. And it's there, it looks like a barge. Like if you were to create a giant's shoe, that's kind of what it was. And it's just a big barge, almost an aircraft carrier if you wanted to, think about it that way, barely. But God remembered Noah and all of the wild animals and the livestock that were within the ark. And he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the water had gone down. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Now, you might have noticed a couple things. If you didn't, let me point them out for you. First of all, a mountain is not the place you really want to stop if you are in a survival situation about to restart humanity, right? Because if you've been in this ark for a long time, you kind of want, if you would have picked it, if Noah would have picked it, I would imagine, he would have wanted a nice little, it would have all been mud, so a nice little mud field, you're not too high up, it won't get too cold, you're not too low down and stuff, you would have picked it a little bit differently, because getting off the ark, if you look at either Mount Ararat or the mountains surrounding Ararat, because I know into several different translations, we actually don't know if it was Mount Ararat or if it was the mountains around Mount Ararat, because all it says, at least in NIV kind of does it justice by saying mountains of Ararat. We don't really know is the correct answer, and there's been a lot of Christian archaeologists that have kind of tried to figure out where the ark is, and I won't wade too much into that. It is amazing if they did. One thing that I would do, though, if I was God, would be, though, if I was trying to restart humanity, and I didn't want humanity to forget what they had just gone through, I would make the symbol that stood for the thing they had just gone through, I would put that really high up, right? In order for mankind to go, that's right, that's where we came from. So, in a godly perspective, because God can keep you alive if He wants to, Noah, of course, is probably resting on this mountain going, is there anywhere else that we can possibly rest? And God most likely was thinking, no, this is where I want you to rest, because I want people to always look up and go, that's right. God flooded the earth, but He took mercy on us too. The waters continued to recede until the 10th month, and on the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains became visible. After 40 days, Noah opened a window he had made in the ark, and sent out, now this is important, and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Verse 8, then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. But the dove could find nowhere to perch, because there was water all over the surface of the earth. So it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days, and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. He waited 7 more days, then sent the dove out again, but this time it did not return to him. Imagine that kind of waiting. I love the Old Testament. First of all, I believe that God is the same God as He always was in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. God does not change. I also believe that God gives people the ability to trust in Him and to overcome mountainous obstacles, and it has not changed. I had someone actually ask me once, and this was when I was in high school, I believe it was my youth pastor at a camp, and we were in a conversation about a biblical story about something that Jesus had done, and he had empowered. I forget actually. Oh, it was the apostles had been empowered to do signs and wonders and miracles and things. And the question was posed to us as kids. We were asked, "Do you believe that God does that to people now?" And all of a sudden, we look around the room and go, "I don't know. Is this something we can talk about?" Because we're from if you don't know about the Christian church tradition, it's a very, we don't speak in tongues. If we do, there's certain, let's kind of lower your expectations. Like, God did not cause fire to come from your hand just because you lit a match, that kind of thing. There's usually a more scientific explanation. I'm kind of watering it down a little bit, but in a sense, you're not saying that, signs and wonders all over the place is not the philosophy. But here we are at a Christian church camp, and we're being posed the question, do you think that God actually still would allow you to do that today if he really wanted you to? And of course the answer is yes, right? Because God can do anything. It says multiple times that anything's possible with God. So of course, if you believe that God is all-powerful, you have to believe that God that's all-powerful can do those things. So then, what's stopping us was the question then. What's stopping us from having these signs and wonders again? And I won't go into that because that's another rabbit trail for another Sunday, but it kind of made me wonder, as a kid, did I serve a God from the New Testament? And then I started wondering to myself, God doesn't change, does he? And of course in my adult life, I know that God does not change. And since God does not change, he still can empower people to do great things. Noah is an extreme circumstance, kind of extreme on purpose, right? To let us know that, hey, whatever you're going through, look at that. God helped a man lead his family through that. And if God can help a man lead his family through that, then you can do anything. And that's very enlightening to me. But he's waiting in the ark for 150 days, right? And after that time, and this is, after 40 days and 40 nights of rainfall, and then after that time, all of a sudden there's these sequences of 7 days, or after 40 days, he opens a window, and he sends out a raven. They're still in the ark, by the way. Imagine how that thing smells after that amount of time. I always go back there, because you have a giant barge full of 2 kinds of every creature. And 2 Sundays ago, we talked about the fact that if you look at the specifications of the ark and take averages of animals, that thing would have definitely fit all the creatures of the earth on it, and still have space for your family. Which does mean that it did happen, and if that did happen, animals did have a smell back then. So, do the math in your head, that would have smelled incredibly terrible. And so you're kind of sitting there, and your family's probably asking you, can we go now? In the ark plans, there is no plan for a window. Noah did that himself. He has one window that we know of, and most likely it's at the top of the ark. So we know of one window. And imagine being shut up in the dark that long, and your crazy dad all of a sudden goes, I'm opening the window, and you go, thank goodness. But he opens the window, and instead of getting out, instead of telling you, okay everyone, it is time to open the main door, he instead says, I'm going to let a bird go. That'll do it. I imagine questioning my father's resolution if he decided to do that. But there's 3 main things I want to talk about today. The raven. The first thing he sends out is a raven. It says he sent out a raven that kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. So I dove into that and I went, why on earth would you, the first time you open the door, there's a window. You've been stuck up in this thing for a long time. Why would you send a scavenger bird out? It would have been an unclean bird. This is a bird that Jewish people could not eat, that God had deemed to be unclean ceremonially. So it would have been one of the two ravens that have been kind of taken for keeping ravenkind alive. Well, raven is a scavenger. A scavenger looks for things that are dead. There's been a giant worldwide flood. Sparing you from the gruesome details, the raven might have been looking to make sure that indeed everything was wiped out. It was completely dead. There was nothing around that was still alive or in process of decay or what have you. That is one explanation of what could have happened. We don't know. The dove. Throughout the Bible, the dove represents peace and the Spirit of God. We remember Jesus and the Holy Spirit descending on him like a dove when he gets baptized by John the Baptist. In a practical sense, the dove was ceremonially clean, and it was an animal who actually they prefer to light high up on trees, and especially in a place where they can see a long way around them. This is especially true during mating season, and especially true with, there's a species of mourning dove that lives in Canby, and they wake up at 3 a.m. I know this because I can hear one outside my window every sinking morning. In a spiritual sense, though, the dove represents our job on this earth. We are emissaries of light who really don't belong anywhere. There's nowhere for us to truly find rest here because it's our home, yet we are hope to everybody else that there is true peace out there for them to grab onto. So this is almost, if you want to think about it, this is almost an allegory, or this is almost a metaphor for us. The dove goes and circles and can find no place to sit down. It's like Jesus, when it's told about him that he would have nowhere. There would be nowhere for him to even rest his head. And Jesus as a metaphor for us that we do not belong on this earth. That's really interesting. That's a big foreshadowing about what's to come in Scripture. And finally, faith. By the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water had dried up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. Now I want to show you something that Noah does, because when I was reading this to begin with, I had to read this over pretty much once a day to kind of understand what was happening. Now, in Genesis 7, I don't really have time to read all of it, but it does talk about the fact that Noah brought along animals that were not for the purpose of just making sure there were animals on the earth, right? He brings 7 kinds of all the ceremonially clean animals, and this is good for sacrifice. This is good for paying homage or homage to God, but also to eat. And you kind of want, if you're thinking about your survival garden or your doomsday kind of thing, you do want to make sure you have a certain amount of animals that can keep the whole thing going, right? Because the first thing that you would do in this circumstance is that you would probably get out of the ark, you'd go to work on a garden, you would go to work on sustainable food practices, sustainable water practices, making sure you had the necessary stuff to get by. But Noah doesn't do that, and that bothered me, because as a home survivalist myself, but as someone who watched a PBS special on floods, I kind of have it's become a little hobby actually. It's kind of fun. We have a certain amount of water and everything like that, and food, just in case, you know. And when I, of course, because I read books about everything, when I read a book about this, which was kind of fun, kind of all about homesteading and everything, if you wanted to go crazy and live way off the grid and things, what I kept coming back to is that this is hard work. And if you choose this lifestyle, most likely 85% of your waking hours are making sure you have food, shelter, clothing, warmth for days. The other 15 is up to you. But 85% of your time is spent working. It's the way it has to be. It's the way it has to be to take care of your family. So immediately I was, now of course I've read this before, but reading this again as an adult who's not in a Sunday school class as a child, my first thought was, wait a second, this is out of place. We take it for granted that what Noah does next, but it's essentially kind of looking away from survival and looking toward faith in God first, and understanding that God can provide you all of the things that you need. So this is really interesting. This, I believe, in verse 15. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply upon the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it." Standard things, right? This is pretty standard for if you wanted to restart society. So Noah came out, together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, All the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds, everything that moves on land came out of the ark, one kind after another. It all makes sense until this verse right here. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. Taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood, and never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." And when God makes a promise, he keeps it for all time. There's two characters here. There's a son and his dad. And Noah's done everything. Noah's done everything he needed to do. All he needed to do was take everybody out of the ark, basically bless the whole thing, say, "Animals, go, do what you need to do. My family will continue and do what we need to do. We have a lot of ceremonially clean animals. We can, of course, begin farming, do all those things. We have seed. We're going to get the whole thing going and make sure our family is okay." But Noah instantly goes back to God, even after all the time waiting on God, shut inside of this stinking box, all the time at sea, basically. Noah remembers God. It starts, remember we started this whole journey with God remembered Noah? Noah turns around and remembers his father and says, "Thank you, Dad." He takes some of the ceremonially clean animals. He takes his own food source, basically. His first things, the best things he has, the things that will keep his family going, perhaps. And he says, all of that is garbage compared to knowing you, Lord. All of that is nothing compared to what you have done for me. I give it to you because you can take care of us. Boy, if that isn't faith, I don't know what is. So as we take this home today, my question to myself, but the one that I'm also posing to you, is, are my offerings to God so costly that he is able to truly bless me? I'll say that again. Are my offerings to God, the things that I give him, whether that be my prayer time, whether that be what I do with my life and my job, is it all about my job and making money? Or is it all about my purpose on this earth? Everything that can possibly be considered worship, my body, the food that I consume, the money that I have, are my resources God's or mine? And am I giving of them in such a sacrificial, costly way that God can fill me up? Because when you give of yourself, and when Noah gave this, he was basically removing maybe even days of survival from his family. He might have even been, removing a lot of their chances by a good amount of percentage, by sacrificing these animals, by basically burning them, by building an altar and burning them. First of all, he builds an altar, which in the Jewish sense is a long process of trying to find the right stones and the right things to build this altar with. And then finally, once you build the altar, we'll learn later that there's a certain thing you have to do with the altar to make it ceremonial okay to burn things on. And then finally, he burns stuff on it, and the stuff that he's going to be using for food. That is a long process. He didn't use his 85% well, because his 85% should have been, sheltered right away, right? Get out of the ark. The ark's not going to last forever, so we got to figure out another place to live. We have to figure out more food, more water, you know what I mean? And finally, he just says, no. My goal is to bless my God for blessing me. I want to show him that he is still in control. Am I ceremonially giving like that? And that's where I'll leave you today, because if you ceremonially give like that, and one of the main things I used to tell myself, because as a teacher and also as a human, I always forget to keep my faith in the forefront of my thoughts as I'm talking to people, so that if there's opportunity to pray for people or to share my faith, I can, right? And you kind of, at the end of the day, you look at your interactions, if you're me, and you kind of obsess over them, and you go, oh man, I should have said something at this point. But what if your actions could speak for you and start the conversation for you? What if you were giving, and I don't know what that means for everybody, but for me, what if I was giving of my things, of the things God's given me? What if I'm giving so much that someone comes to me and basically has to tell me that I'm weird? And it's happened a few times. Not that people have told me I'm weird. I get that a lot. But in this sense, people have come to me and gone, they're uncomfortable using language around me, like swearing around me. People are very uncomfortable with that. I've never said anything about it. I've definitely had people check themselves around me, fellow teachers and things and students. They'll come to me and they'll go to say something and they'll go, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I'll actually be able to start the conversation. "Why are you sorry?" And basically, they don't know. They really don't know. They go, "I actually don't know why I said that. You just seem like someone who's not into that kind of thing and you're above that." Am I giving of the rest of my time, my life, my possessions, and everything about me in a sacrificial way to where everything is like that? Where compared to the world, I look flat out weird. So I'll hand it to you as a blessing. This week, may your offerings to God be so costly that He is truly able to bless you. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for extreme examples like Noah. Thank you for extreme examples that tell me that I can do extreme things, that no matter what the cost, and no matter how close to the edge that I need to be in order to serve you, that you will always